Hello, good evening. Good evening, everybody. Thanks for joining us here this evening. Welcome to today's webinar titled Mental Health in the Oil and Gas Industry. I'll be your host for today. My name is Kola Kapuni. You're welcome once again. So, um, in putting together this particular webinar, we thought it was only right to set the scene a bit to let generally the audience understand the reason why we're doing what we're doing here today. And to paint this picture, I'm going to borrow a few words from Eugene Farrell. Eugene Farrell is the mental health lead at AXA. So Eugene goes on to say, until recently, oil and gas industry has had a poor history of dealing with mental health. While the oil and gas sector is known for its high safety standards, these are generally focusing on physical health and disregarding mental health components. Although some companies are actually starting to shift this focus, and I can attest to that, a lot of companies are starting to actually shift focus. Um, I'm continuing. The oil and gas industry may have failed to address mental issues among staff in the past, partially because it is a very male-dominated industry, and men tend to find it more difficult to speak about their feelings and emotions. So yes, we are going to go there today. We are going to go there. And at some point, we're going to also try and draw parallels between what Eugenia said and draw the focus back to us as a culture. If you've been part of the Efikos webinar series from the beginning, you'll have been along this journey where we've said the theme, the focus is essentially sub-Saharan Africa. And it's not, I mean, we all know it's a male-dominated culture, so there are a lot of parallels that we're going to be drawing here as we go along. The current state of the oil and gas industry, I mean, you sometimes, only have to open up your phone and it's headline news all the time, global oil prices. And just so that we paint a good picture here for the folks in the audience who perhaps are not part of this industry. So it is very natural for someone who doesn't work in the oil and gas industry to hear about falling oil prices to automatically feel there's going to be that same fall in prices going to be reflected at the pumps where they buy their petrol or other products. It's a very natural reaction. And unfortunately, that never is the case. And the flip side to that is whenever you hear about global cuts or oil prices falling, at the top of that pyramid is an operator who has a profit, who has a margin with which they can conduct their daily operations, maintain their existing infrastructure, build new infrastructure. So once the margins start to drop at that level, it sort of starts to trickle down along the pyramid. The oil servicing contractors, the engineering contractors, the manufacturers, the fabricators, the procurement people. So it just starts to go down that pyramid and everybody is affected. You have a situation where at the end of that pyramid, a father is losing his job, a mom is losing her job, an uncle, an auntie, list goes on. Even at the end of that pyramid, perhaps it's a guy who can no longer afford that engagement ring. Who knows? Job losses, redundancies, all of this are reflective of the current state of the industry. Um, Energy transition and digitalization and digital integration. If you've been part of the Efikos webinar in the past, we talked about energy transition. We had a webinar on decarbonization, and I think our very first webinar was on digitalization and digital integration. Essentially, whilst these are progressive, good things, there's also growing pains. And as you know, with any period of transition, there's growing pains to adjusting to that transition because unfortunately, a lot of the pace of that transition doesn't have sort of like a human factor to it, like a human comfort factor to it. It doesn't have a human comfort factor to it. So you as the guy who or the lady in working in the industry, you have to You have that is that constant anxiety where you have to keep pace with all these transitions and all these constant changes and revolving doors. Safety. This particular point, fortunately, does not apply to everyone within the industry, but it's not unusual to pick up your papers, watching TV, or even know an individual, a friend, a family member who has been kidnapped out there in the field, ransoms being demanded, very, very ugly situations or unfortunate situations. We're going to go there as well today. So, moving on, I'm going to be introducing our guest speakers for today's webinar. The first speaker that I'm going to be introducing, Dr. Lade Longa. Dr. Lade has over 15 years work experience in the field of mental health. He has a master's degree in public health from University of Warwick and is on track to complete his master's degree in neuropsychiatry from King's College London. Dr. Lagde also works within the NHS and the private sector. Second speaker for today, Femi Akiemi. Femi Akiemi is a business consultant, executive coach, a speaker, and the host of You Unleash podcast. You can find You Unleash podcast on any of your digital platforms, Spotify, Apple Music, Amazon, etc. Very great podcast. You guys check it out. Third speaker for today, Banke Anyoleke. Banke is a clinical pharmacist. She's a public health and policy consultant, and she's based out in Abu Dhabi. Fourth speaker for today, Benga Agbola. Benga has over 10 years work experience in field of safety, risk and loss prevention in the oil and gas sector. He has a bachelor's degree from chemical engineering from University of Lagos, a master's degree in chemical and process engineering from University College London. Currently works as a design safety engineer with Wood Group here in the UK. So, to the question, what is mental health? I'm not going to define this, and I'm sure coming into this today's webinar, a few of you have probably asked yourself that question: what is mental health? How does it relate to me? We hope to unpack a lot of that here. So I'll be calling on our first speaker for today, Dr. Lade Longa. Dr. Lade, can you join us, please? Thank you. So over to you now. When you want me to flip through, just instruct me to do so. Just say next slide and I'll flip right through. Thank you.
Thank you very much. It's nice to be amongst you professionals in the oil and gas industry. So I'm just going to crack on with this. What is mental health? I guess one thing that comes to mind is, health of the mind. I've put in here the WHO definition, according to the WHO, who have highlighted basically that it's a state of well-being within which individuals can function. And I guess, everyone has a state of mind with which they can function normally. And, we get to know ourselves over a period of time and know what we can and cannot cope with. But I feel that the definition is a bit more complex than has been presented by the WHO. And I think we need to talk a bit more about those very key things that impact our state of mind. If you go to the next slide, please. So what influences our state of mind? I think to start with, it's us as individuals, who we are, what makes us a unique person or individual. I think we're all the product of our experiences in life, and we have set ways of dealing with stress or difficulties in life. We have our own limitations as well. Some people can cope with lots and lots of stress. Some others just, they crumble within, when they have to deal with very little. And that basically is determined by what, our experiences of stress has been through life and how we've observed people deal with these things. Put in there a couple of things that maybe might alter your state of mind or the way you cope with your day to day. Um, and I think this applies to most of us, if not all of us. Um, I talked about things like, what sort of friends you have, family members, people around your social, sort of social interactions you have, your core beliefs, your physical health is very key as well in terms of having a good well-being in terms of your mind. Um, at the end of that, there is the research that's been done by some psychiatrists way back, I think in 1967 or 1970 or thereabout. Basically, they try to identify what sort of stress levels people can cope with before they develop or at risk of developing mental health problems or breakdowns, if you want to put it that way. Um, and their research came up with quite interesting things. Basically, I think at the top of their scale, they found that the most stressful thing people can probably deal with is probably the death of a spouse or a loved one. Um, and they also identified things that like moving houses that could actually be massive sources of stress for people. Um, and their research sort of highlighted that if you have a certain number of stressors in place, that if you hit a certain point, you are at significant risk of developing mental health problems. If you go to the next slide, please. And I thought I'd sort of, use some um, images to sort of depict what sort of things affect our state of mind. Um, So, as professionals, at work, you have um, a life at work, you have a life at home, you have your social life, you have lots of things sort of coming together to determine your state of mind at different points in time. Um, you cannot underestimate any of these things, and it's very important for all of us to make sure that for those things that we can control, that we do our very best to make sure that things are in order. So when I say things you can control, your physical well health, your diet, and things like that. Um, Try to access healthcare when you do need it. Interact as much as you can. Social capital is a very big thing when it comes to mental health. Isolation doesn't help. Um, and your level of activity is very key as well. Okay. Um, Next slide, please. So I thought I'd sort of share a bit of the way we view things from as professionals from the mental health point of view. We have what we call the biopsychosocial approach, which is because we know that there are many moving parts to the whole of an individual, to the functioning of an individual. And so we have to explore those things. And what we try to do is basically try to figure out which bits we can modify or improve to boost the mental state of the individuals. Um, and so we approach things from the biological, so looking at biological factors, things like individuals' physical health, because we know for a fact that when people are not feeling too well, physically it affects their mental state as well, and how well they can cope with stress in life. We look at psychological factors, what makes us tick, how do we process things, how do we process situations, you know when you're anxious, how do you react around that, when you're facing difficulty, how do you react, how do you respond to it, are you able to process things under stress, are you sort of the type of person that needs to take a step back, um, take a breather before you make decisions and stuff like that. We also look at your, things like your social factors, talking about people's core beliefs. Sometimes when we have a headache, based on our background, some people might think that's down to something they said to someone else, somewhere or whatnot. And we know for a fact that, as Nigerians, it doesn't take us too much to start thinking of what our enemies might have in stock for us. And I think it's very important that we consider those factors as well, because if someone's constantly thinking that there's something going on somewhere, then how do they respond to stress? How do they cope in their day to day? I've highlighted a couple of things like financial status, alcohol, unemployment, housing. And I think these things are also very important. But what we try to do as professionals is try to support people around those things that we can modify so that they can cope better with the stresses that we cannot change for a fact. Move to the next slide, please. I think it's very important that we talk about and highlight the impact of the pandemic on our mental health. And the only thing that I sort of um, I'd like to point out is, I think I want everyone to take a step back and think about when this whole thing started and how we all responded to it, what sort of thoughts went through our minds, um, what did we do about it, how did we react, um, and you come to start to realize that we all respond to stress in different ways. And because I'm very sure that we all did so many things that we probably didn't think we'll do in situations like that, but because it's not something we've experienced before. But we all had ways of coping and sort of managing that stress. Um, and it's also to think about how it has affected us. We know for a fact that people have lost loved ones, and friends, and we've all heard of the really sad stories around. But at the same time, we know that people somewhat have benefited from all of this as well. So where do you sit in the middle, within that continuum? How have you fared with this pandemic? I think thinking more specifically around you as professionals in the oil and gas industry, how has that affected you? I think we would need to be talking a bit more about that. Um, Next slide, please. Just a few statements of facts from research highlighted by mainly by the World Health Organization. I think it's consistent that at least 1 in 4 people would have mental health problems at some point in their lives. That's to say about 25% of the world population. When you think about that, that's a huge number. Um, and there's an argument to say that we all come to different points in our lives where we struggle more with our mental state, depending on what difficulties we're facing at that point in time. But the other fact that's highlighted here is the fact that 2/3 of people don't seek help, and that's a lot when you think about 25% of people having mental health problems, and just 2/3 seeking help. I've put here something about Nigerians actually, that in terms of the research that was done, that showed that almost uh, 1 in 10 would have experienced anxiety or depression um, through their lives by the age of 75. Um, Again, one can argue that value might be more. Some might argue it's probably less. Um, but these things are ongoing, and we know that we have to deal with it. We have to talk about mental health problems. Next slide, please. So useful links. I think we're going to share the slides, and you'll be able to follow through with the links. I would provide some more information. That's the end of all I have to say at this point. Um, there is a poll that would come up on your screen if you get a chance to complete the poll. I think we'll use that as part of our conversation down the line, and I'll be happy to take questions and comments as we go along. Thank you very much.
Thank you for that, Dr. Lade. Before I release you, it was interesting in hearing the stats coming out of Nigeria, and just quick thing occurred to me, like do we actually have a great number of people like yourselves, professionals like yourselves, that work within either the public healthcare system or the private sector in Nigeria?
Well, there are lots of psychiatrists. Well, when I say lots, the truth is that there's not enough in Nigeria. We have, and there's this brain drain going on at the moment. Um, I think I know more psychiatrists, Nigerian psychiatrists, in the UK than in Nigeria, um, and that's a fact. So there is a problem in terms of access to healthcare, but I think that's probably brought on by a lack of policy in terms of at the level of government. To be honest, I think there's lots that could be changed and put in place to support people and help people sort of deal with mental health. There are other issues as well, which are social factors as well. But I guess we might touch on those things at some point later in this conversation.
Yes, yes, most definitely we will. Thank you for that, Dr. Lade. Thank you. So we're going to continue on our journey on the mental health webinar journey. So next, I'm going to share a quick literature review. Sorry, I'm going to share a quick literature review with you guys. So there was an applied ethnographic study that was undertaken in the United States. It was called Depression and Perspectives of Nigerian Immigrant Men in the United States. The authors and the executors of that study are right there on the screen. So without going too much into it, essentially the crux of it was about 18 to, I think, 30 men were polled, and across from various ethnic cultural backgrounds in Nigeria. So they're all in the diaspora at this point. But basically, it cuts across various professional backgrounds and all of that. And the result from this poll suggested that the concept of mental health was still regarded as a foreign concept. So essentially, even though you're in the diaspora, but the subject of mental health, when it's sort of is thrown out there, it's viewed more as a foreign concept than something that is applicable in our daily day-to-day lives. So I just thought I'd just throw that out there real quick. Whilst you're digesting that information, I'm going to call our next speaker to join us. Banke, are you ready? So Banke is going to come in and talk to us about why the subject of mental health is important. Why is it important to us? Why are we even talking about it? Banke, are you ready?
Yeah, I am.
Okay, so I'm just going to run through your slides. So next slide, that's it. So over to you now. Go ahead.
Okay, thank you very much. Right, so can you guys see me now?
Yes, we can see and can hear you clearly. Thank you.
Perfect, thank you. So basically, we're going to move into like why mental health is important. And I think that the very core of it is just that you cannot separate it from physical health. And I think once we agree on that, the backseat that mental health has been taken and the status quo can be corrected. So mental health and physical health are actually inseparable. It's either going to manifest in sort of physical disability, or even if you were to be in a physical disadvantaged situation, it could affect your mental health. So historically, it's been ignored and underrepresented for several reasons, which we're going to like deal with a bit later. But I think at the core of it, stigmatization is a problem in the fact that identifying with struggles in the mental health sector, or even the treatment options that you might have to consider, will put you at a disadvantage in a social setting, okay? And that really deters people from seeking help and admitting their struggles, right? And also we have the issue of the prevalence. There's some sort of discrepancy between the real prevalence and the perceived prevalence. So the prevalence is high, and that's what I need to tell you guys tonight. So numbers don't lie. And if you just go back to what Ladi was saying about the projected risk of a Nigerian person for anxiety, we're looking at 7.1%. okay? And then 8.9% for depression. These are real numbers, okay? But if you were to talk about it as to why mental health doesn't have the shine it deserves, it's because people think it doesn't affect us. It does. The burden of disease is also significant because really and truly, public policy is based on how much of a problem a society thinks a disease is. That's what's going to govern how much money we throw at it, how much capacity building we have for it. If we say to us, it's not important, we're not going to make revenue and capacity and things to deal with it as much of a priority. So the burden of disease with mental health is significant. It does eat into the quality of life of individuals affected. And we just need to go back to the core of it. If your mental health is optimum, it's going to promote your productivity in work, in life, and your overall effectiveness. If it's optimum, your roles in relationships and family life will be optimum. Less breakdown, less cost to the society, less cost to businesses, okay? Because you're not going to be taking time off. And more importantly, it builds resilience for you as an individual because it allows you to adapt to changes in your life because, you know, as a fluid individual, changes will occur. So you can learn all the change management in an abstract context, but if you don't apply the introspection that's required as an individual, you may not be able to adapt to little or big changes. And if adversity does occur, as it does, you don't have the capacity to deal with it. So mental health cannot, I mean, the significance of it cannot be underplayed. If you don't manage it when you have mishaps, you can have such a debilitating situation that you might actually have it leading to income loss or general stability. If you can go to the next slide, please. Right, okay. So if we just focus on the status quo, right, and we actually specify and hone in on the oil and gas industry, as it were. It's a good example because physical and mental health assessments are the norm in most industries, but more so in this because safety and all of that is important. You often recruit the fit people and the most able. So the physical side is often catered to, but maybe not so much the mental health. But there's a paradigm shift, right? So people are talking more about it. Industries are learning how to monitor and manage wellness and mental well-being of employees. So they're doing their part, most people, right? But if these measures are to remain valid and to be reliable, the individuals within these industries have to normalize prioritizing their own mental health because, you know, you can only get as much as you're about to give into a lot of things. So if you as an individual have not prioritized it, if you have an ostrich effect, always burying your head in the sand about mental health, you cannot take up those opportunities that come in your workplace, in your industry, and in your life. So we have a responsibility, and hopefully that's what we're going to get to tonight, to cultivate the culture of authenticity and openness when it comes to labeling our emotions, labeling our struggles, and basically how we move around in understanding our world. So mental health support can be challenging in the fact that it's often multifaceted, right? So you really do need the individuals to buy in. So if I come into your industry and I'm telling you about how important mental health is, and these are the things that can optimize it, you have to believe all those aspects and you have to find it relatable. Otherwise, I'm not really connecting with you. And that's why as a demographic, as a culture, as people in the STEM industry, we really need to normalize talking about it. It's quite integral if we're going to continue to survive. And then the mainstay treatment strategies, when you have labeled, when you have admitted that mental health is significant and it's important, the mainstay and cornerstone still remains psychotherapy, which is therapy as you and I know it, as well as pharmacotherapy, medication, if diagnosis comes out of you examining your issues. And like I said before, even these things can still have stigmatization, depending on where your head is at with them. Next slide, please. Okay, this is a bit small, but I try to talk off the mark. Right, so if we've labeled it, if we've admitted to ourselves that it's important, if we've put it on the same rank as physical health, we also have to figure out why are we struggling? What are the barriers to actually seeking help? Because if you had high blood pressure or you had diabetes or you were even pre-diabetic, you don't struggle with seeking consultation. You don't sort of fight the medication you're being prescribed. So what is it that makes mental health a little bit unique? Because the barriers to seeking help support need to be ironed out. And let's just start with the stigma. There's a lot of stigma associated with admitting that these struggles and these feelings and this introspection is what you're doing, okay? And a lot of people don't want to have the conversation. They don't want to go there. There's also the notion that you may assume that your reality, i.e. the struggles that you feel, even if you live with them, is the norm or it's expected. We've had conversations such as like people contemplating on such things as high functioning anxiety, where you work hard, you meet targets, you're on high drive, and or you live in Nigeria. I'm a Nigerian, I'm expected to work crazy hours and have high stress levels. No, actually, you're expected to live normally. So there's the assumption that that reality is the norm, and that's an issue. There's also concern or lack of confidence in the interventions you might get based on the fact that you don't trust the cultural competence of the support providers. So a lot of us that live in like UK or the States that are Nigerian heritage can understand this. You're living in the West, but your reality is you're still as Nigerian or as Ghanaian or whatever. And whatever support they're providing to you at work, you're just thinking, Jane in HR cannot understand how I'm going. She doesn't really know the pressures of my mother-in-law. She doesn't get the fact that my wife needs to treat me as a man in the house. Those things are important. And if you don't believe in the intervention, or you don't think the person is going to get it, you may not be so eager to seek help. So that's quite significant. There's also difficulty in contextualizing mental health issues, such as anxiety and depression across the job roles, across cultures, and gender roles. You may find it very difficult to say how you're feeling. Even if you do have a spouse, a man might not understand how I'm feeling about certain things. A woman might not understand how a man is feeling about certain things. Some industries might feel like, the person in HR does not really know what it's like being offshore, onshore. So these unique differences are there, okay? Essentially, our ability to actually distinguish between an effective coping mechanism from a toxic one is also a problem. It's hard to distinguish a poster child from a child or person who is just doing so much more and overcompensating for a lot of struggles, okay? So we need to learn to do that, and we can only do that by talking about it. There's trust, okay? A lot of people have social capacity and networks, but they don't have anyone they trust enough to actually have real, open, solid conversations with. You have a lot of drink buddies, but there's no one to actually talk real issues with. So that goes into the social structure as well. So it's a double-edged sword. You might have too many people, you might have too little people, you might have the wrong people, okay? Then impression management. We have to admit that we have to be seen a certain way, and sometimes seeking help, admitting struggles, just is quite contradictory to the impression that you worked so hard to create. And so these are things we need to have a little bit of introspection on. If you feel like you can identify with some of those, that's probably a good start, and we can sort of resolve how to move from that. Because if you identify the barriers, you can deal with them, right? So essentially, when is a good time to reach out for help? Probably before it starts to get really acute and serious. I would say typically when you start to see changes in your overall happiness, or you see certain changes in your relationships. Next slide, please. Okay, so what are ways in which you can get support? You could go back to the social network and the capacity that Ladi talked about. Basically, take advantage of connecting with other individuals, friends, and family. A lot of us within our culture are not lacking in this aspect, but the authenticity of these relationships is what I often worry about. So you can really just determine how that affects you. If you have people at certain ages, we tend to only have colleagues or tend to only have certain friends. You just have to, be a bit more proactive in seeking relationships that may benefit you in this regard. You can learn more about mental health as well. Your reading material, your podcast, just cover a part of the pie chart to actually invest in knowing what this is all about. Within your health structure, if you live in the developed world, the primary health professionals such as your GP, your pharmacist, are actually well equipped to give you an overall checkup, the way you would do it with physical health. you have mental health assessments as well if you're feeling a bit jiffy or you think something might not be quite right. Certain industries also have this incorporated into their assessment profiles, and they do offer this. Solutions often include, in a longitudinal way, okay, just practicing mindfulness. You know what I mean? Just looking at your issues and having honest conversations, sometimes uncomfortable conversations with yourself. Then as a society, just work on reducing stigma. If something you go through and you share it, and then there's less shame for the next person, and so on and so forth. Normalizing things such as cognitive behavioral therapy. So, you know, having it talked out, going to therapy, it's cool, it can be cool, and it's an effective solution. We also need to review what we reward, you know, as an industry leader, as a society, as a person. Don't pressure yourself by rewarding the wrong things, you know, be quite comfortable in what things mean, what's important to you, and be confident in what you've determined to be of importance. You also need to review your self-identity in the context of what we discussed in terms of impression management. The man of the house does not necessarily mean that you don't have emotions, you know, so check that out. Medication is your friend. I know a lot of people would just roll their eyes when we speak of medication. In the right context, in the right hands, from the right professional, it's a viable option. If it's needed, it's worth, you know, considering. I think that's me done.
Yes, indeed. That was your last slide. Thank you for that. Thank you so much, Banke. I was going to make, there was a point that one of the points you touched on that sort of hit home was cultural competence of support providers. If you don't mind, just I know we have a time slot for each of these presentations, but if you can just spend a minute and just expand more on that, because that particularly hits home for a lot of us, particularly for people who work in the diaspora or are ethnic minorities in whatever countries they find themselves. Can you just speak a bit more, expand a bit more on that particular point, please?
Sure. Just to lighten it, I can relate it to, there's that notion of Sally from HR, right? Okay, who's literally some sort of young girl, blonde girl, who doesn't have the competence to understand that you're coming from a different frame, who doesn't appreciate the fact that those things that make your makeup are quite different, that might affect the way you deal with stressors. So for example, people from immigrant populations often feel like religion, culture are things that govern how they have to do things in a certain way, right? And even if you just think about normal marriage counseling, for example, the fact that you feel like the person would not understand, okay, because basically they are not from your culture, they are not your gender, is an inherent deterrent in itself for you not to bother, because you don't believe that they're going to be able to help you because of the basic lack of understanding that they cannot help. Okay, and I think that is particularly important in the oil and gas industry because you've got the cultural, for this demographic, you've got the cultural aspect, you've got the gender aspect. So I think it's important for us as professionals. I mean, Lade would probably agree with me here as well. We need to build capacity so that there's diversity in the people we'll employ. If you see someone that looks like you're more inclined to say, okay, she's gonna get it. She might not be the same gender, but at least, she has a name that sounds like mine. She might understand the pressure from my mother-in-law. You know what I mean? So for industries, they need to understand that you have to have a diverse group of professionals to cater to your demographic. And if you live in any society, no society is monolithic. They're all very varied. So there's a responsibility, even if it's language barrier, these barriers are very important because they don't go away. And you can say what you want, you can legislate what you want, but you can't legislate how people feel. So you just have to have a diverse group of people that your staff can feel comfortable enough to go to, or at least some sort of attempt that you get it. And when you don't, you should signpost them to someone that might be like them and might have the ability to exhibit such cultural competence that they're not convinced you are able to provide.
Wow. I actually like that last part, so there's also a responsibility on the companies themselves to ensure that the people that are there to take care of the workforce are actually representative of that workforce demographic as well. Thank you for that, Banker. So we've had two presenters come in. We have a third presenter going to come in now, Femi Akinyemi, to speak on overall well-being. Why is our well-being important? What is well-being? Femi, if you can hear me, please, that's your cue. Please come online.
Okay.
Right. Start your video and we get this going. Okay. So, all yours.
You can see my video, I take it.
Yes, I can. All yours.
Yes. Fantastic. Thanks for having me. So, well-being is, in effect, it's an element of mental health. It's all part of what points to well-being. Now, well-being from research is really, it's the experience of health, happiness, and prosperity. So it includes having a good mental health. So in effect, you can't have good well-being without having a good mental health. And that's why everything that's been said before, as far as what mental health is and what you need to do, are so critical. Because when you have a good mental health, it adds up to having a good well-being as well. Because well-being is, in effect, a life of satisfaction, living a life of purpose, living a life of ability and ability to manage stress. Now, I usually like to share a very personal story when I talk about this quite a lot. And it was really about when I was having my second child a few years ago. And I was going through enormous stress at work. And I was almost being bullied at work. And I was having to deal with all of that pressure. So on the day my daughter was being born, the reality is that I held my daughter and I was so happy. But at the same time, at the back of my mind, it was almost, what am I going to do at work? When paternity leave finishes, I still have to go into work and face all of this. So that stress was weighing on my mind. So in effect, you have somebody who should be experiencing the most important or one of the most happiest days of his life. And yet he's overcome with negative energy, with stress, which meant that mental health wise, I was not in a good place. So I couldn't enjoy that moment in its totality. And it also meant that my well-being wasn't good. Now, really, I was happy, but at the same time, I was sad. So this is what really and that just shows how much your well-being can be impacted by your mental health. And really, when you look at it, there's so much that goes into your well-being. And because it's a life of balance, ultimately, and as an executive coach, this is what I share with a lot of people. One of the things we should always try to seek in life is a life of balance. The moment your life is not in balance, something is tipping over somewhere. And when something is tipping over somewhere, it gives. So you can't work too hard and not have enough time for leisure and play, because what happens is you get under stress. But you can't play too much as well, because if you don't have work, you don't have a sense of purpose. And when you don't have a sense of purpose, you get under stress as well. Not to mention as well that financially, you are struggling as well. Banker has already spoken a lot about your physical health as well. If your physical health is not in any kind of good shape, what happens again is that generally you start to have other things follow and they deteriorate. So we always talk about one of the four pillars in mental health, which in well-being, which is your financial, your recreational, your educational, and your spiritual. And you've got to keep looking to build up on all of these things and keep an eye on them and monitor them. And once any of them is out of sync, once any of them is out of line, it really results in stress. So well-being is really about experiencing health, experiencing good health, happiness, and prosperity, and includes having a good mental health and just a high life satisfaction. You wake up in the morning and there's a sense of gratitude, there's a sense of purpose, and it's the ability to have perspective, the ability to look at your life, and in spite of everything, you practice mindfulness and say, okay, things are bad here, but they're also good because. So, and that's a big thing. And when I think of a lot of Nigerians I coach as well, or people who are minorities, one of the things I always come back with well-being for a lot of them is when you talk about well-being, the first thing you talk about is taboo. It really is, what is well-being? That is a luxury. To have well-being is luxury. The fact that I'm alive, which is good, is perspective is good, but then they say it's a taboo. Why, if I'm not feeling well, what's the big deal? And that was what happened to me personally. when I was having that mental stress of having my daughter born, but being under enormous pressure at work and being bullied, I couldn't tell anyone about it, because to tell anyone about it came across as a sign of weakness. Because what people would tell me is, you have a good job, you're earning money. Why are you worried about a manager? And I couldn't tell people that, oh, I'm going through this stress. So one of the things as minorities and Nigerians we struggle with is to mention it is always a sign of weakness. To mention that my health, my mental well-being is not good is a sign of is a sign of weakness. But then the other things as well is that we don't suffer stress. That's the general thing. We like to say that, oh, as Nigerians, we don't suffer stress. Life is stressful as it is. But when you look at the life expectancy of us Nigerians and people from minority countries or people from countries where there's inherent stress in their system, you find out that the life expectancy is a lot shorter than people from other places where things in life are a lot more secure and they have a better sense of well-being. So you realize that actually we do suffer stress. Just because you are a frog that's been boiled in hot water from the beginning and you're not moving doesn't mean you're still not being boiled, as they always say in that experiment. So the fact that stress is around you and you're living in the stress does not mean the stress is not having a deteriorating effect on your life. So as people of minority, we have to accept as well that we do get stressed. And when we get stressed, it's okay to say, I am stressed. And that's one of the things. And when you do say you are stressed, you automatically get into asking for help from the right people and then getting the medication or the support you need. Another thing as well we find is that with people like Coach and with Nigerians as well, when it comes to well-being, is the concept of faith without works. Now, I don't mean this in the truest sense of faith or religion, but what I mean is that a lot of us, we like to accept there is mental health issues, but then we sweep it under the carpet and say it's going to be okay. When in actual fact, there are clear methods, techniques, medically proven approaches you can take to improve your mental health and your well-being. So I'd encourage us to also look at that. Finally, it's about your body first. You look after your body and your mind. So a lot of us always think that, oh, if my body is fine, my mind is second, but they go together. It's body first, mind first. There's a consequence of looking after both of them and they follow. So I think that's what we find. And so that's what it comes down to. Well-being is about having that health. And these are the indicators you can use personally. What's your health like? Are you generally happy? What's your prosperity like? And prosperity isn't necessarily always about looking at the pounds and pence. Because if you look at the pounds and pence and nairas and dollars, sometimes you can have all of that in the bank account and not be doing well. So it's really just about saying, are you happy in yourself? It's really, are you feeling well? And sometimes we can overcomplicate it. And what I'm saying is that sometimes it's really, how are you feeling? Asking yourself that question, how am I feeling today? Am I grateful? Am I feeling well? Am I well in myself? And then once you start to say, oh, I'm being honest with yourself in that moment of mindfulness, you start to realize actually you didn't need to. So it's really about looking out for these signs and also not bowing to the stereotype we have put upon ourselves. These catchphrases and slogans that, if I may say in the broken language, oh, we don't suffer stress. That's how life is. Or yeah, it's going to be okay. Or don't worry, my body's in my cloth. I'm good. But we need to share. And well-being isn't a luxury. It's not a luxury. It is a necessity. The very basic need of every human being is to have well-being, is to be centered, is to live a balanced life. Because when you do that, automatically in your workplace, you are productive. In your marriage, in your life, in your family, you are productive and you are fruitful and you're of use to them. Because if, in effect, if you are not an effective member of your relationships or family or work because of stress, then you're not being effective. And then all you do is you get under more stress. You could lose your job, and then that exacerbates the stress. So that's what it is. So to wrap it up again, well-being is that general sense of just being happy. Is that sense of being, feeling well, and then looking out for all these balances in your life: spiritual, financial, recreational, educational, making sure that you're consistently building on them. You don't sway too much of one to the other. And again, do not bow to those stereotypes that they've put around the minority and people in general, and men in general as well, and even sometimes women. which is that to say, oh, I'm struggling is a sign of weakness. No, it's a sign of strength. It's a sign of being humble and realizing that, yes, I am struggling, I need help, and you'll be better for it. So that's my bit.
Thank you for that, Femi. Thank you indeed for that. That was, quite insightful. When you were going through the part about stress, as far as painting a picture, with stability as well. Something I was going to ask you a follow-on question, but this occurred to me, and I thought I'd just throw it out there. So historically, and if I draw comparisons to how the guys that work in tech, in IT are right now, in Nigeria, historically, oil and gas workers were seen as today's tech guys. Essentially, you were the flavor of the month. You represented stability. You represented a bright future. You represented progress, something progressive, innovation, and all of that. So if you were a woman looking to date a guy, as soon as the guy says, "Oh, I work in oil and gas," and the guy says it, it's almost like full chest out and everything, because it's like he expects a certain reaction when he says, "I work in oil and gas." So historically, you've been seen as the model of stability, the model of progression, and we've now come to this impasse now that it is now almost difficult, after you've taken all those accolades, for you to now go, openly admit that, hey man, like, I'm struggling. Because even when they're even your friends, even when you try to tell your friend like what you're going through, blah, it's you now. Nah, you're all right. Like, we're trying to reassure you that you're all right, because I mean, you work in oil and gas, for goodness sake, you should be all right. So it's that difficulty in being able to express yourself, because at the same time, vulnerability is not something that comes naturally to us men. So I was glad that you touched on that point. We're going to still come back to a lot of the things you said, because they're quite multi-layered, and so that we don't dwell on it now, we'll hit it up on the back end. We're having loads of questions coming in, and please go through the questions. We're going to be picking them up at the back end with our audience members. Thank you for that, Femi. So I'm going to go through the next portion of the presenters who are going to be sharing their experiences. So I'm going to call on Benga Agbola. Benga, if you can hear me, that's your cue. Please come on. So just what we were talking about previously, as far as we set the scene earlier, global oil prices, once they start to dip, job losses, even for people who come back after a job loss, that anxiety when you're trying to reintegrate yourself back into the workforce, the feeling of when companies change direction, pay cuts, when you do, when you are working, when you are engaged, the time you spend away from family, when you have to go to a foreign country, sometimes you don't even speak the local language there. People that work in Nigeria, I mean, we've heard stories, kidnapping, banditry, even, threats from, local wildlife. So with all of these things, and given your, vast experience in the industry, and you're one of the guys who also has the luxury of having worked in, some parts of finance in the London Stock Exchange previously. So can you just share your experiences as far as being in the industry, being outside of the industry, how you sort of managed the whole mix over the last couple of years? Go right ahead, Benga.
Hello, everyone. I'll start by saying, in the past 10 years or 12 years, there's been likely 3 downturns now. For some reasons, it has impacted me. I remembered working at the London Stock Exchange when the financial crisis started. All our contracts were suspended, and I felt bad because I was approaching my second year at the London Stock Exchange. Work was good, everything was going as planned, and all of a sudden, job just disappeared. I tried my best to try and get back into the financial industry, but I guess part of the obstacle I faced was the fact that I had an engineering background. So as a result, I decided to go back to where I was coming from, and that's the engineering, which I did. Worked in the engineering as well, went in as a contractor. And I think sometimes in 2015, there was the crude oil price that sank, jobs disappeared again. And I found myself in the same boat or the same ship. My contract came to an end and it wasn't renewed. And then I started asking myself that question: should I have just stayed at the stock exchange, or stayed in the financial industry, or just kind of, you know, what should I have done? And the first month came, second month came, made application, sleepless nights, had so much energy, money disappearing gradually. And, you know, it just kept on going months, first month, second month, third month, fourth month, no job. And along the line, I started questioning myself that, why did I go to school? That why would I, with all the hard working, all the struggles, then I think about the impact Nigeria played as well, and I didn't give up. Kept on applying, and still no jobs. And I looked around me, so many of my friends too were at home, and it became kind of, will I say I don't know. I was going to ask Dr. Lade, at what point do you think one goes into depression? I don't know, for some reasons, I tried to manage the fact that I was jobless, and what I did then was to focus more on the kids, became, um, what would you call it? Is it full-time daddy, taking them to school, bringing them back, making the meals for them. But actually, I used that to kind of close the thoughts of being unemployed, not bringing in any money, and the bills were piling up. And, I didn't just want to think about it. But it was reality. Nothing was changing. I tried to apply to other jobs as well outside my industry. I could remember there was a particular job I did where I had to stand at some bus stop counting a number of buses that were going. I was giving a counter, and I was thinking, really, with all my masters and all that, that itself was depressing. But one has to provide, one has to pay the bills and all that. And the the downturn in industry went for so long, and at a point when we were not getting any job in the industry, the Nigerian factor came in. Whispers started coming in. Have you offended someone in the past? And then you see yourself bringing out your background paper. Who have I offended? Which uncle did I say? Did I tell to shut up? Which girlfriend did I walk away from? you know, Whispers were like, better start begging everyone. All that itself was very demoralizing. But I think at the end of the day, I just had the feeling I had to kind of understand that I should concentrate more on what was within my control and take my mind off whatever was outside my control, which I think helped me. I tried to stay positive, and you know, I just felt that it was, like I said, outside my control. It wasn't me that was going to increase the price of crude oil. I found myself in the industry. There's absolutely nothing I can do about it anymore. It's either I stick in or I leave. I tried to do all the courses. That's quite interesting, as a way of kind of blocking all the thoughts coming to my head. I tried to do other courses. I remember I did business analysis, I did NEBOSH, I did different courses. I did enjoy them, to be honest. Yeah. And I felt bad because I could have gone to another industry, but my mind wasn't there. I was just glued to the oil and gas, and I felt maybe it was a case of I didn't want to make that mistake of I've started my career in the financial industry, jumping around. But at the end of the day, it was just reality, and I just had to keep on going, stay strong, focused. Wasn't easy. There were times I was wondering, well, it crossed my mind when I felt, especially when things weren't getting better, uh, was I an obstacle to the progress of my family, especially my wife and kids? Am I blocking the blessings? All these very crazy thoughts comes to one's head, and you're beginning to wonder, are these thoughts even normal? Why should you even be thinking about that? Then I now think about people that actually jump in front of trains. Such thoughts can drive you to think, oh, maybe if you take yourself out of the picture, maybe there will be lights in the tunnel. Maybe you're just blocking all the necessary, what do you call it, blessings that we call it, you know. But at the end of the day, it's reality. Life isn't fair. We need to remain strong. My family were there. I spoke to my family regularly. I spoke to my friends as well. But I remember there was a time I just felt there was no even point talking to anyone anymore. I started isolating myself, and I know Kola was a pain in the ass then. He would drive from his house to come and pick me out, or make it compulsory that let's go out. You're not staying indoors. My bed became my best place in the house. Always on the bed, the laptop on the bed, watching TV, watching series and all that. But at the end of the day, it was just a case of trying to distract myself from the thoughts that keep on coming, because you just can't, you know, drive those thoughts away. And well, what can I say? I was going to ask Femi some questions. He talked about good well-being and good mental health, and I feel in reality, when we talk about in reality, can we actually have a good well-being, especially when so many things happen that are definitely out of our control? So how do you
Yeah,
align that together?
hold that thought. Since you put the thought to Femi, I think it's only right at this point, because at this point of the webinar, we're going to be less structured, and I know a lot of these things are on the screen right now, but since you've hit on a particular subject, no, come back on, Benga. I'm just going to bring Femi in to just directly respond to that question whilst the question is hot, because we are having lots of engagement coming in from the audience at this point. So I'm like, why delay it? People have genuine questions. Instead of going with scripted formats, let's just go right ahead and talk about it. Femi, I'll bring you in first. Can you just respond to what Benga just said?
Could you repeat that again?
You talked about equating good well-being to good mental health. But I question that, because in reality, do we actually have good well-being when so many things happen that are definitely outside our control? So where
Yeah.
do you get the balance most, you know?
Well, it's a very interesting question, and I think a lot of it comes down to understand. It's about, as we say, one of the things we always say is try. There's so much you cannot control, but always trying to focus on what you can control. Now, it's difficult. It's not to say it's not difficult. So a good example is applying for a job. Now, I coach a lot of people for looking for jobs, for example, and I've been through redundancies a number of times. And it took a lot of time for me to realize that, short of me taking a gun to an employer's head and sticking it to his head and say, give me that job, there's only so much I can do. So I started to realize that I needed to do some things. So I would wake up in the morning, I'd go jogging to make sure that that one first calms me down, because I understand that releases the dopamines. It releases the dopamines that make me feel good. Then I would literally ring every job agent I can call. I would apply for every job I can. And once I do that, it makes me go, okay, I've literally done everything I can do. There's nothing much I can do after this. And that's one thing so when we talk about well-being, it's about everything. And I think mental health is part of it as well. So your question is right, which is that if your mental health is not right, how can you, I think in a way we are kind of saying the same thing. Because what you're saying is, if there are some things out of your control, and once those things hit you, what do you do? And I think it's getting to that point where you realize that actually you can't do anything about those things. You will never be able to do anything about those things. So it's the things you have to do that you can only focus on and do your best, and then realize that to a certain extent, the things you can't do anything about, it is what it is, and that's the thing, because what else can you do? And I think it's realizing that you can't control everything. I think for a lot of us, when it comes to well-being and mental health, we like to think we can control everything, but you can't. But that's where the problem is that you can't control everything. And it's learning to let go. And that's part of being a well-being, is also to know that it's relaxing and mindfulness into yourself. It takes practice, and that's the big thing about it. It takes practice. Now, I'll give an example myself. It took me going through redundancy about 1 or 2 times, being at home for about 6 months, and finally finding something that I realized that I can't do anything to change this thing. I can only do the things I can do, and end up going, you know what? I just have to wait for it to come. And they come eventually. Because I remember speaking to you even when you were going through this challenge, and we didn't get to speak a lot. But I remember always saying that it's about understanding that, can you wait? Because it comes eventually, but can you withstand the wait? And some waits are longer than others.
So while still on that subject, thank you for that, Femi. Lade wants to sort of expand a little bit on some of the things you touched on. Lade, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. And Gbenga, thank you so much for sharing your experience, which I believe I was fully aware of during that time. You asked that question about well-being, and if there is really, if one can achieve well-being. I think there's no set way of achieving well-being in the perfect sense of it. I think you need to aim to have a balance. One of the things that Femi pointed out that he did was going out jogging and all of that and being active. I mentioned earlier about the importance of having that level of activity in your life and making sure that, while other things are not working out, certain things are being optimized. So definitely you were feeling down at the time because, a big aspect of your life was not, a huge aspect was not moving forward. But what you could maybe have done as well is to maintain what we call a structured routine. I think where we're humans and we're not built to be sedentary and inactive. We're built to sort of be out there, do things that would feedback or have positive feedback on your well-being. So, something that Femi mentioned about going jogging, definitely that helps if you're able to get through it. And I know your response to that on a personal level, Gbenga. So I know that would probably not have been an option. But we've talked, a number of times in the past about things you could do as well, just to keep yourself going and active. So it's about actually, when you're in that sort of, state of mind, you need to actually sit down and have a look at your day and think about what you could do during the day that could potentially be productive. And the truth is, you did a lot. You were doing lots and lots of training. You were out there trying to get into a new gig or the other, every time you had. And the truth is, you also persisted with those things. And in as much as you look back and you think that was a low point in your life, somehow you were able to cope and you were able to get through it. And you had a level of resilience. And I think it's something that you built over time, and you somewhat sort of, in your own way, you made those things work for you. And the other big thing that I think you appreciate it actually, but you didn't really mention it as a big part of how you coped. You talked about it. You talked about your family. You talked about your wife, your children. You have extended family. You have friends. You had a social circle. You had social capital. And that's something, even though you said you tried to isolate yourself, the fact that you had friends who were still saying, let's go out, that was helping you cope to some degree. Um, it's difficult to actually value or put a value on those little things, but they go a long way, and you could never compare it with not having friends or close family members and being on your own dealing with that. Um, and so the key things I need to sort of highlight is if you find yourself in that sort of situation, try to have a structure to your routine or your day, and try to build on it. You need to be very calculated in how you prevent and protect yourself from going downhill, and finding yourself in a situation where, say, for example, you're constantly sitting and watching TV. It's still good you're watching TV, you still have some distraction, but um, if you do it consistently for too long, then you're actually making the problem worse, definitely. But I think the fact that you had other things going on, you had other responsibilities, you had the kids to deal with, you had, your friends, your family members you were talking with. From my point of view, I think those things helped, and they went a long way. Even though, like I said before, you cannot put a value on them. It's difficult to say how much it helped or whatnot, but they did help. I can tell you that for a fact.
And I think one thing I'll just add to what Lade said, Fem here is that, and I think what I find is that it's always important to remember that it's unrealistic to go through these things and expect you to be smiling all the way through. It's more about your resilience. These structures give you an ability to be resilient. So when you go through these valleys, they allow you to come back very quickly. But sometimes to expect you will go through them and not have any awareness or acknowledgement of the stresses as well, it's unrealistic. So it's more about building that structure, and everything builds resilience in, so that when you have that dip, these other things you do very quickly lift you up again. Because reality is that it's really about getting out of that dip and not staying in the dip. Because when you stay in the dip, it gets deeper and deeper and deeper.
Very, 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 very correct.
No,
one second, Lade. Before you come in, because there was one of the points that Benga touched on that sort of there are a lot of parallels in what Banker delivered earlier on in her presentation. So Banker, can you just come in and speak on that a little bit for us, please?
Yeah, sure. Hi, Benga. So I think his question is basically, look, the world is crumbling down. I hear what you're saying, but this is my reality. So how about that? And basically, I think we have to go back to mindfulness as one of our options and solutions of how to do it. And I think there was another question in the audience about that as well. In terms of mind training, Benga, there's a school of thought in therapy, and Ladi can probably augment this here, that allows you to appreciate that two opposing things can be true at once, okay? So life can be abysmal, right? In one hand, and then there could be other things that are okay with it. Or just your ability to accept the fact that, look, life is abysmal, okay? I've lost my job. This disaster is here to stay, and it is staying. And your ability to reconcile that truth. So two opposing situations can be true at once, and your ability to accept that while working on other things you can do. If you don't get the capacity and the resilience that Femi is talking about to get to a situation where you can accept that two things that are very contradictory can exist at the same time, it will be very difficult for you to go through life, because it's very unrealistic to say that bad things are not going to happen. They will happen, but you need to be able to apply the theory of mind training that allows you to accept that these two opposing things can coexist, and you can navigate that, So it's not the absence of problems that allows you to function optimally when we talk about well-being. It's your understanding that one doesn't define the other, and they're not mutually exclusive. So if that makes any sort of sense to you, let me know. If it doesn't, I might be able to expand or elevate the concept.
It does.
Okay. Thanks for that, guys. Again, I mean, the thinking for this webinar was we're just going to spend an hour, 20 minutes, dip in, dip out, because we don't want to I mean, it's a busy Saturday for a lot of people, particularly here in the UK, semi-lockdown situations compared to full lockdown before. So I know a lot of people are eager to get out. I personally keeping my eye on 8 o'clock because I want to go watch Chelsea play football. So I appreciate you guys being here with us, but please do keep the questions coming. This is a very, very important subject, and well-being. I mean, it's a lifestyle essentially. What the guys are preaching here is we need to make a lifestyle out of you know taking care of our mental health. It's not just when we're down in the dumps. The essence of today's webinar is not to try and paint a morbid picture, but also to say, look, hey guys, it is okay to have these conversations. And a lot of the questions, looking at the structure of a lot of the questions, we're going to be reading some of it shortly. A lot of it, a lot of people are worried about stigma. Stigma is sort of the underlying theme I'm getting here from a lot of the questions that are coming in from our audience members. So in moving forward, and please guys stay online because again, once I run through the next couple of slides, we're just going to throw the questions out there fully. We're going to stop the poll as well, and Lade will see the results of the poll that we have been running. So we've talked about the effect as far as job losses are concerned. We talked about safety. We are going to actually we talk about safety in a different context. Banke has a story that she might want to share while she's cooking that up. There are other aspects to this as well that it's only right that we speak about. Um, there's one thing that it may not apply to everybody, but we need to talk about is shifting personas or shifting personalities. At work, you're one person. At home, you're one person. With your friends, you're somebody else. And essentially, it's not a bad thing because you try to adapt. The need to adapt, the need to integrate into whatever situation you find yourself is actually viewed as a skill. It's actually one of the skills that most recruiters look for in an individual. Can I put you in a multicultural environment, and would you swim in that multicultural environment, or will you drown? So your ability to easily integrate into any system is viewed as a skill, but at the same time, the flip side to that is there might be loss of identity at some point. You start to lose, who am I? Because I'm gradually shifting personas depending on the environment I find myself. And as much as you try to, put this in little compartments, we're human, and unfortunately, sometimes your work creeps into your home life creeps into your work life, and the cycle keeps going. I don't know if Debola, Debola was going to share a story about, just the feeling about being away from family. A lot of us obviously have worked remotely in the past. We wanted to touch on that a little bit before we move on. Debola, just prompt me when you're ready, and I'll give you access and we can get into that. If not, we'll just scroll right through. There's another point, and I'm going to bring back Banker to talk on this. So essentially, Banker, you speak on previous thing we mentioned about as far as the safety subject, and also there is the aspect of what's the word used? Perennial experts, people who work in, who are experts who go out there. You're more comfortable perhaps when you leave home, and when it's time to come back home, you start getting a little nervous because you're more comfortable with delegating responsibility of home care. And when its responsibility falls on you, you start to get nervous. So we have all of these dynamics. Bankel, as being that she lives in Abu Dhabi, which is predominantly an expert community, you get to see a lot of people come and go. So she has sort of like a viewpoint, which is quite privileged in some aspects to see how people, proud personalities, shift depending on when they're coming in and when they're going out of station. So Banker, these 2 points, can you just spend a few minutes and just speak to these, please?
Okay, I think I've just unmuted myself. Right, okay. Right, I think I can just draw comparisons, right? So if we take, Abu Dhabi is an oil city, right? So you often have enough oil companies here. So we get the rotation, as it were, of like a lot of companies have already built into their system where they make people come every 2 years and they rotate them, unless you're particularly good and your sector wants to keep you for longer. But what I find with those expats, especially in the oil and gas industry, is that's not so much of a worry for them. Okay, they come, they know they're here for 2 years and they're gonna go, next gig would be Hong Kong or Scotland or whatever. They've already built into their system that either the family keeps moving around with them or the family stays in one place. And these options are actually factored into some of the industries. The only problem with those laws is the fact that when I've had personal conversations with them, the inability to set up roots is a problem, okay? Because already you're of Nigerian descent. If you were in UK, you're already always trying to live and keep one home in Nigeria, keep one home in London. But at least you can buy a house, you can establish yourself, you can say, okay, I've set up root here. A lot of them struggle with that. That 2 year on, 2 year off can be problematic. It gets worse with some of them that are not there with their family, who are in the middle of Ruwais next to Saudi Arabia somewhere, and they're stuck in a camp. It's a very different experience. So you could gather 5 people and they have totally different experience of how Abu Dhabi is lived. Their lived experiences is very different. Same sector, same gender, same culture, but their lived experience is extremely different. So this is the reason why it's never a one-size-fits-all when you're dealing with someone. As a friend, as a professional, you have to listen to their stories and you have to not invalidate their experience and not assume that it's the same. So a guy that worked in a camp that only comes to the city every 6 weeks doesn't have the same experience as someone that's here with his 2.4 children, and another one that hates being in London anyway and is being moved to Abu Dhabi. Like, who wants to go back to 12 degrees and paying tax? He doesn't want to do that. So everyone's experience is different. Then you've got people like myself who are not in the oil and gas industry, who have chosen to come here, or we followed husbands here. And I like it here, but will I be able to cope when I move back to London? These are honest conversations that's probably hard to have with friends. When you become an expat, you have that curse, if you like, of not being able to function properly when you go back to your home country, whether that be Nigeria, whether that be UK. You might just get used to the tropics, and going back to the cold is just not that fascinating. So these are things you have to worry about, and you have to see how it affects each person. And just because you don't see it as a significant problem doesn't mean that the person doesn't see it as a significant problem. To some other person, working away from home is fantastic. I'm in Singapore, I'm in Hong Kong. To other people, they've missed their family, they miss the pub, they miss several things. So you just have to see what it means to different people. And that's my experience. No one story is the same.
Thank you for that. Thank you for sharing that, Banke. At this point, I'm going to start reading some of the comments and the questions coming through. Once I read something, if it's a question and it's directed at any one particular person, I'll just throw it to that person to just respond. There's a lot of commentary as well, and I'm going to read out some of the commentary. So first commentary from Sunday Olota. Thanks for joining us, Sunday Olota, one of our very regular listeners on this platform. And I think he was speaking towards the strategy that Femi talked about. He said, key strategy, focus on your sphere of influence in situations you don't have control, i.e. you're waiting for a job, you can only focus on the things that you have direct control over. It's kind of easier said than done, I know, but I happen to agree with him because I was in a situation where I was home for, 9-10 months, and believe me, those situations were not pretty at all. That feeling of inadequacy sets in, that feeling of lack of self-worth. I went through all that emotions played a part. And it's funny how back then I didn't. So okay, let me. I think if I share the story this way, it probably make more sense. Leading into today's webinar, after we started putting up the flyers, the posts to say we're having this webinar, I was getting the occasional message, Benny Shekosi, that's typical Niger way of like, guy, is everything okay? Is how is madam? How are the children? Some people actually come out and say Shekosi. Some people find a way of going around, how is the family? Some even ask how the weather. Then they will now find a way of landing on the real reason why they're reaching out to you. But on the flip side of it, during those 9, 10 months, you know, everyone's seeing the news every day, oil prices, all-time low. No one, I wasn't getting those sort of concerns like, how is your mental health? How are you coping? Is that feeling like everybody just feels oil and gas workers, they're going to be okay. They're going to be okay. Anyways, nice one, Sunday Olota. Thanks for that. We also have commentary from um, our own very own Coco D, Prayer Coco. He said he agrees with what I think a lot of people have agreed with what both Lade and Femi said earlier, having a structured routine to include exercise, even when, so let me just read what he says. I agree, having structured routine to include exercise, even when we have a job, or, we're still searching, it helps. It's a tried and tested structure that has helped me deal with work stress life at all. And I have also experienced, sadly, people do not think this subject is as important. So thanks for that, Kokodi. Thanks for sending that through. Also, we have a couple of questions. I'm just going to go to the Q&A section. By the way, all panelists, can you guys all see the Q&A button? So if you click on it, so whatever, just in case I'm reading it too fast, I'm just going to be reading it in chronological order, and I'll call upon you to answer. Somebody posted a question, and the person sent it anonymously. By the way, I'll be ending the polls in the next 2 minutes. So if you haven't participated in the polls and you do want to participate, there's 2 minutes left to participate before the polls end. So please go ahead and do so. The person says, I am worried if I seek help for my mental health, I might be disadvantaged, stigmatized at work. Can you share any advice on how I can manage this problem? So I'm going to first of all throw this question to Dr. Lade. Lade, the question has been put forward. Can you respond to that, please?
Thank you very much. Right, it's always very difficult when you find yourself in an environment where you feel um, saying something would put you at a major disadvantage, especially if it's a place of work. But there are a couple of things I don't know about, the work environment, the location, for example. But I'm going to just assume it's Nigeria, and that you work with certain people that you feel would discriminate against you in a way, consciously or unconsciously, if you sort of let out your vulnerabilities. The thing I would suggest you consider doing is exploring the possibility of accessing support, if possible, outside the workplace. And I'm saying that because um, if you feel that you're not feeling safe enough to do that in that environment, then I wonder if that would be the better thing. But the thing you don't want to do is not to deal with it at all. I think it's the issue of resolving stigma is more something that needs to be dealt with at the society level, but it also depends on how each and every one of us deal with it. Um, some workplaces do have the occupational medicine department, or you have access to an occupational um, health professional, and maybe you could explore that possibility. But usually, they still work with the organization. So if you don't feel that confident or that safe in doing that, then I still think you need to figure out a way to seek help, possibly get access privately if it is Nigeria. But if you are out here in the UK, I'd strongly suggest you consult your occupational health department if you have one, or see your GP. I can assure you that whatever you say to them or speak to them about is held in confidence, and that you're provided a safe place to or safe environment to express yourself and get the right support that you can access. There are lots of I'm not sure about access to psychological support in Nigeria, but if it's something I could pass some information to caller to sort of disseminate once I sort of get some information, because I do know people there. They might have more information about that.
Thank you for that, Lade. Thank you indeed for that. So the next question, I'm going to pair two questions together, and I'm going to put one of those questions to Banke, and the other I'm going to put to Femi. And if for any reason either of you want to speak more on what the other person has just said, by all means just prompt me and we can do so. So the first question coming from Shola Olarinwaju. Thanks for joining us, Shola. Shola says, I think one of the major issues with balancing mental health is dealing with vulnerabilities. In some parts of the world, being vulnerable is deemed a weakness. What tips can you share on how to shift this mindset, that narrative of, vulnerability equaling, weakness? How do we shift that, narrative? This other question is, how can I be supportive to a member or family member struggling with their mental health challenges due to a job loss, such as the one Benga described? So there are two aspects to this, and without asking, any one of you to pick on the particular one they want to speak, I'll just throw it open. So Banke, we just run ladies first here. You go first, whichever one you want to speak on, either from the perspective of the family member trying to help either a spouse or someone who is struggling with their mental health challenges. How can they be of help? The second part of that is, as far as being vulnerable, how do we change that cultural mindset that it's equivalent to weakness? Banke, you go first, please.
Okay, I'll just touch on each of them very briefly. For the vulnerability one, I think with that one, you can just start with yourself, right? The culture is
Sorry, Banke, we're struggling with your audio. You weren't coming across. Your audio was a little muffled.
Yes, you switched to Nigerian network. Be careful.
She switched to 5G network, hasn't she? Okay, so whilst Banke is trying to reconnect, Femi, can you pick up those questions and respond to them while we try to get Banke back? Please respond to the question of vulnerability, equaling weakness. How do we change that mindset? And also, if you can respond to the individual saying, as a family member, if a family member is struggling with mental health challenges, how can I be of help? Go right ahead.
Okay, so I'm going to try and cheat, and I'll go for the second one first, hoping that Banke makes it back in time to come and chip in for the second one. But let me do it in the order. I think with the family member, one of the things we can do is we should always make sure we are not the source of the pressure. We don't become sources of pressure to the person, that is because they're already feeling it. And the one thing we have to know is that for the most part, and we're talking now about most people, and the example we're talking about is someone that really wants to work, right? Not a lazy person, someone that really wants to work. So not someone that is lazy that needs a kick up the backside. Someone that is trying his best, wants to work, and is genuinely stressed and is feeling stressed. One of the things we shouldn't do is we shouldn't become sources of extra pressure on the person. So we should try to understand that the more we put pressure on them, what we find is that we make it worse. So one of the things you can do is it's the way you communicate. So one of the easiest things you could do is actually say, is there anything I can do to help? Is there anything I can do to help? Is so much different than how are you getting on with it's so much different than why are you not having a job yet? What can I do to your help? What do you need from me? How are you feeling right now? How are you feeling about it? Those kind of questions. When you say, how are you feeling about it? What it does is it's an opportunity and it's an open question. It allows the person to start to share and talk about it as well. Or something else is, what can I do to help? Is there anything I can do to help as well? That's another thing to do. But the one thing we should always try to do is make sure that we are pressure relievers, not pressure exerters. Because when you exert more pressure, you're not helping because the person already knows. Now, to use Benga's example, There is nobody that feels the lack of the job more than him. So the last thing he needs us to do is start putting the pressure on him. So what he needs is actually a better conversation, and he needs someone to just encourage. So empathy, I understand what you're going. If you've gone through it before, empathy. And if you haven't, then it's really, what can I do to help? How are you getting on? You know, is there anything you need from me? How are you feeling? These open, encouraging questions. And most importantly, if you know you can't genuinely encourage the person with your speech, it's probably best to leave them to it. So if you know that you cannot say anything encouraging without coming across as, why haven't you even got a job yet? What are you doing? Then you're probably better off leaving them be, because you're only making it worse. And I know that's something Benga can probably say, because he speak to. As far as the vulnerability, I think one of the biggest things we can do about vulnerability is I think, to change the mindset, is hopefully it's in your period of strength, in your period when you yourself are going through a period that is buoyant and good, model vulnerability. It's a lot harder to be vulnerable when you are going through it. But when you're in your period of strength, one of the things, and it's almost a link to the first part I answered, if you are vulnerable enough. So I expect someone like Bengana, what he can do is someone to help to shatter these myths. Is the next time he meets someone that is going through the same thing, you cannot underestimate just him being on this call and being vulnerable, sharing some truths that people here already have heard, and it has transformed them already. So one of the things we can all do is, in our period of buoyancy, when it's a lot easier, take advantage of that period and be vulnerable, to show that being vulnerable helps. Because when you're vulnerable, it encourages others, and then encourage other people to pass it on. That being vulnerable helps. So I think those are the things that often I know that certainly can help. Is modeling the behavior in the good times, because it's easier in the good time than the rough time to be vulnerable.
Can I keep something in now?
Yeah,
I
please.
think considering where we're coming from, our culture is a very big barrier as well. Because at the end of the day, we find ourselves in situations where this cultural idea that if things aren't going well for you, there's a problem somewhere. That doesn't help matters as well. And it always crops in most people's situation when people are going through even crisis in their marriages, or not even, no babies yet, no job, searching for job and all that. Our culture tends to push you towards the fact that there's a problem somewhere. That itself, it's a big, I think the earlier we try to separate ourselves from those beliefs and the impact, we might say it might not affect us, but sincerely speaking, it does affect. I can remember a very interesting situation. I followed someone for some church program, and what would happen next? The prophet looks at me, calls me from the back, and says, "Oh, by the way, this and this and this is what you're going through right now. You need to buy this holy oil and all that for things to get better." And I'm thinking, did someone actually just send all the details of my life problems to me? And I sat there and I'm like, let's be honest, this I wasn't vulnerable. I could have fallen for that. You get. But so many people fall for that. That itself causes so much depression when you think, and it's our culturally, there's a problem. So the earlier we separate ourselves from that cultural aspect of things, the earlier the better as well when dealing with problems in our lives.
You're absolutely right and spot on with that. Banker, is your 5G network ready to join us now?
I believe so. You can tell me.
All right, please go ahead with the point you were about to make earlier, please.
Right, okay. So quickly on vulnerability, I do agree with Femi. I think in my experience, what I've been able to do is when people, I'll talk on friendship and partnership. A lot of my male friends that I know that on a good day, this is not their forte. When they've expressed vulnerability in their place of strength and in the place of weakness, what I, as a recipient of information, have done is I encourage that. I make sure that there's a conducive space where I'd be like, I see you. I actually dig the fact that you went there. I appreciate the fact that you're saying that to me. What you don't want to be is that woman or that man where your guy has come to you and is made an attempt to be vulnerable, and you're just not very gracious about it. So the very thing we can do is, even if you're not the one expressing the vulnerability, if you're the one receiving information on it, be gracious, give encouragement so that you can reinforce that behavior. You know, if someone is coming into your DM and saying something, or when they start to say something, have the sort of keywords or just active listening that encourages that behavior so that it continues. That's one thing. Another thing in terms of modeling it, like vulnerability, even in your strong place, make it a thing. People would aspire to a way of life if they see you exuding that and they respect you. If someone they respect can come to the forum, maybe WhatsApp groups or whatever, and actually say, you know, guys, this is what I'm doing, or I narrate the story. Like, for example, how Benga has been tonight, it's been so empowering. So you're not never gonna see that and not be inspired. So if we flip the story and you start seeing expression of vulnerability as something quite impressive, okay, as recipients, then people will feel more encouraged to do it. So it's not so much about people not doing it or wanting to do it. It's us, the audience. In terms of supporting, I'm a wife, right? I think the most humbling thing about trying to be supportive is actually realizing that sometimes you're not in the most optimum place to be of support. Sometimes I've had to go and have an introspective session with someone else just so that I can be a wife. It's very arrogant to think that you're already always in a place to be a supportive wife or supportive husband, because sometimes I'm carrying the baggage from the resentment of your situation. Like, you're the one going through the job loss, but I'm already dealing with the fact that how is it that it's put us in this position? It's not cute. I can't admit it, but I'm feeling it. And I have to be comfortable not to invalidate that feeling. I have to have the unpleasant conversation with myself, or go have that conversation with someone else. When I get right within, then I can be right with that person. A lot of the lack of conducive environment you have in a lot of our cultural marriages is the fact that you can't talk to the next person. You can pretend to be empathic, but you can't truly be empathic if you don't have the facility within yourself. So don't be arrogant enough to think that you're equipped to have an empathic relationship, an empathic conversation, when you haven't dealt with how that person's struggle has impacted you and how you have processed it. Not until then can you then transfer yourself to be some sort of problem solver, because you have to get right within first.
That is actually a fact, and it is important that we get right with ourselves, because only when you're right with yourself can you be of help to the next person. And typically in our oil and gas industry, we typically work in teams. So essentially, it's hardly a one-man band. So essentially, it may not be you, it may be your team member struggling, and it's almost like because they are struggling, it affects the overall outputs of the entire team. So I know a lot of questions have been coming through from the audience as far as how do we spot the signs? How do we know if someone, close to us within our social circle or even at work is struggling? So there were a few things we put together, and I'm just going to run through this just because it's there. So symptoms of a person experiencing a burnout, or any telltale signs of someone struggling, feeling of depleted energy. If you are feeling that way, I'm not saying necessarily it is linked to mental health, but these are some of the signs that have been put forward. A lack of care over your personal appearance. I mean, you don't want to be the guy that everybody's always asking Shekosi, just like we talked about earlier. Frequency of minor illnesses. That also shows that you perhaps, unless there are underlying situations, obviously, that also shows a lack of care for your mental well-being. Sudden, weight gain, weight loss, ups and down, irritability, and it's funny putting together this slide. It's almost like you're putting it together with a view of trying to raise the awareness, educate yourself, But then again, you start seeing certain things that start to cut home, and then even me, I start getting into a mood funk myself, because like a lot of these things, I start seeing myself in these situations, how I was, how I, how I must have been a nightmare to be around, during my 9 months out of work. Because I usually, my default setting is, when struggling, just close up, lock up completely. Even mom can't get through to me. Like, so we typically fall into that protective default mode. And as Femi mentioned before, the subject of well-being is not necessarily when you're down. You have to, in fact, it's part of, it has to be ingrained into your lifestyle, So just going on, irritability, withdrawing from social interaction, and I put working from home close to that, because as we've experienced, we all kind of work in bubbles now. Whilst you get in professional interaction with your colleagues, via either Microsoft Teams or Zoom or whatever platforms you guys are using to work remotely, you're still missing that social interaction bit. And, credit to companies who have tried to, reintegrate a bit of social interaction into their daily routines. But once you start gradually withdrawing from social interactions, all of these are telltale signs as well. A decline in relationship with your colleagues may be a telltale sign of burnouts, or you're struggling. Alcohol abuse, blurred lines. A lot of people experience blurred lines. We talked about it before. Especially if you're working from home, you need a system where you separate your work from your personal space. So it might be that your station, you only sit there to log in when you want to work, and when you're not working, you get up and go do something else. Or actually, when it's time to log off, you actually do log off. A lot of us fall into that pattern of, man, I'm just bored on the weekend, I'm just going to log in and do some work. You need to start establishing within your home, where is your work environment and where is your, for lack of a better word, play environment. I skipped something. It was deliberate that I skipped it, but I'm going to bring it back, and I'm going to throw that question at all the audience members and all the panelists. And I want each of you to just, for the panelists, obviously they'll tell me, they're going to tell me. For the audience members, just type it in the chat window. I'm just curious to see how this, what answers come out. What is your comfort snack? What is your go-to snack when you're trying to get to that place of comfort? It can be it can be edibles, sweets, coffee, anything. What is your comfort snack? Let's throw that out there. What puts you in the right zone? I know a lot of people go for chocolates from the vending machine and all of that, but yeah, I'll start with Dr. Lade. He's a professional. He must have a comfort snack as well. So, Lade, what's your comfort snack? What's your go-to choice?
Honestly, I think I just go for anything that's got sugar in it, to be honest. I don't have any, I just go into the fridge and I just look for anything that's got sugar in it. Most of the time I end up eating a biscuit or something. And the truth is that to a good extent, I know that's not the best thing to do, but I still do it anyways. When I'm stressed out, I figure out ways to, initially I sort of indulge myself. I go into that, state of worry, and I just roll with it for a period of time. But I very quickly also know that the longer I do that, the potential, there's a high potential that things will get worse. So I look for ways to snap out of it. But yes, I tend to go for sugar to start with.
Okay, we have sugar, 1 point for sugar. Femi, what's your comfort snack? What do you turn to?
It's gonna be pasta or ice cream.
Pasta or ice cream? Wow, we're
Pasta.
getting more and more sophisticated as we go
Yeah,
on. So,
it's just comfort food.
comfort food. Yeah. Okay, that's good. Again, the whole purpose of this, we don't want to throw a morbid, theme out there. Like, look, it's okay to have these conversations. Let's talk. We're all friendly here. Gbenga, let me come to you. What's your comfort snack?
Recently, it's been honey coated peanuts.
honey coated peanuts. See,
Yeah, that's why
Banker,
I
you
do.
have to really do better than all of this. So, like, we can't be saying we save the best for last. You cannot come and say kuli kuli or come and say something. You have to really raise the stake here. So, Banker, what's your unmute yourself? Please tell us what's your comfort snack.
I think it's chocolate, but I tell you what I really do, and don't judge me. I just basically say, I'm gonna pick chocolate, and then I get my atlas out and I just throw something at it. I'll be like, I'm booking a holiday to go there. But what I do in the meantime to walk to the atlas is get the chocolate. And I tell you, I spin the atlas, I get a destination, I book it right there and then. It could be later on, but I've satisfied my urge. That's what I do. People that know me well know this is fact.
Well, hey, what? See, I didn't know how you were going to top what Benga said, but hey, man, bravo, you topped it up. So somebody is saying cashew nuts in the audience, like that's his own comfort snack, cashew nuts. Man, shout out to you, cashew nuts. Somebody said, what? Oh, somebody, we have an audience member, PJ. PJ is agreeing with Benga, saying honey coated peanuts are actually quite delicious. She didn't mention what her comfort snack is, but she's mentioning
Smarties.
She did. She said bread.
bread.
Yeah.
Is it agege bread or is it? See, because bread is not bread. We have to.
Okay, bread baked by Peju and Himen.
See, our Nigerian audience. You guys are too sophisticated. I cannot pronounce a lot of these high class. Somebody said, sorry. I'm going to disgrace myself here. So people that know me, please, I'm disgracing you alongside, myself. Hagen das oh man, how do you say this? What's that? Is that ice cream?
Yes, it is.
So lolly is lolly now. Lolly, ice lolly. Andrew Jason. So all this plenty grammar is all about ice lolly. Ice lollies works. Shout out to you,
You have
Jason. That's
sufficiently
family.
disgraced us, my darling. You have sufficiently disgraced us.
Yes, please. Can you pronounce it? How do I pronounce that? So I can get it next time. All right, okay, we'll skip past it. We have somebody saying, Fadeka is saying Bordeaux and dark chocolate. Man, Nigerians, you people. Wait, how much are these things? Because I'm trying to look for recommendation here, so I need to make sure that
versions.
they have Talaka versions. Man, in fact, Ade Martin saying whiskey. Hey, shout out to you, Ade Martins. Whiskey is a good choice. Deji saying bread or biscuits. Okay, Deji, I'm sure it's cabin biscuit because I've known you for a while, and Deji loves cabin biscuits. So I'm sure Deji's talking about cabin biscuits. What else? No, what this person said, I can't say it. They'll cancel us.
CDB edibles.
Tolu Abujere or Dekun in capital letters and apostrophe everything. Okay. Kalumi says Smarties. Okay, good. Keep it coming. What else do we have? Lollipop. Another lollipop again. Oh, Priya. No, Priya is agreeing with me that all this ice cream is all ice lolly. No, it's all ice lolly. Okay. Somebody says CBD. It's okay. Taiwo says Asun. Man. Shout out to Asun lovers, man. Shout out to Asun lovers. Please, anybody with Asun Connect, drop it in the chats, window right now. Today's Saturday. It'd be good to get some Asun. What else do we have? Okay, I think we've run through it. That's good. Thanks for participating. So I've ended the polls. Lade, I'm going to bring you in here. I'm going to share the results of the polls with everyone now. Okay, so I'm sharing the results of the polls. Can we all see the result of the polls? Okay, I'm just going to read through it. So the question was, the following is not a mental disorder. So we have 70 people saying gambling is not a mental disorder. Can you speak to that, Lade? Let's take it one by one.
Yeah,
does this paint the picture?
Very interesting. So gambling is classified as a mental disorder. It's an impulse control disorder, similar to what you have with people who have alcohol dependence, the people that can't help themselves, but go and do certain things. And the key way of supporting people like that is via psychological therapies and motivational interviews and the likes of it. Stress is not a mental disorder, and it's quite interesting to see that
Wow.
22% of people have chosen that as opposed to the majority. But yeah, I think I wanted to highlight these things because people have their impressions of mental health, and sometimes we think we know it, but sometimes it's not really what it is. So I can tell you for a fact that I've treated people with impulse control disorders, things like gambling, in hospitals, and they've been admitted to hospital before. And a lot of times it has more to do with them becoming suicidal after, breaking their vow not to do it again and stuff like that. So people struggle with these things, and their real life issues.
Okay, so we're going to go to the next one, and that is question number 2. I have experienced mental health challenges in the past. So the results are there. Speak to the results, Lade.
Yeah, I just thought I think we'll throw this in the group of people attending and see what we get. And you can see that we've got 48% of people here, and the data that we have basically highlights that in our lifetime, at least 1 out of 4 would have mental health challenges or mental health problems. And I think the question says mental health challenges, so this makes a bit more sense that you have more people highlighting, because it doesn't mean that they have a mental disorder. It's just that highlights the fact that they've struggled at different points in time.
Okay. Okay. Good stuff.
And it also sort of tells us, how huge it is and how it impacts us, because there's lots of people that deal with these things on a day-to-day.
Okay, good stuff. Third question. I have seen a professional about my mental health challenges. So results are there. Speak to it.
So this is different. This is quite interesting. The data we had presented earlier on highlighted the fact that 2/3 of people, roughly 66%, do not seek professional support, and we've got 63% here. So that it makes sense that that we're getting this number in our small cohort, sort of indicating this. And you can see that about 1 out of 5 have indicated they have not considered it at all. And we've not asked why in this case, but then I think it's important to know that you cannot ignore your mental health, because it will have a massive impact on how well you cope and function as a whole.
Okay, good stuff. Fourth and final question on the poll. In your opinion, that's the question to who is applicable to. In your opinion, what are the main challenges people from sub-Saharan African backgrounds face in accessing mental health care? So now we had the options of language barrier, cultural barriers, social stigma, unconscious bias in health settings, conscious bias in health settings, and we had not knowing where to seek help. So in this particular question, the poll results, I'm going to ask all our panelists to speak to it, because that's going to be the last section for everybody. So Lade, you come in first. You speak towards that. What's your take? And let's keep this as brief as possible.
Yeah, I think if we have a look at what we've been talking about all along, this more or less reflects the issues, isn't it? We've highlighted the issue of social stigma. We've talked about cultural barriers and our belief system, and how it affects the way we process things or view life as a whole. And we've also touched on the issue of healthcare in the Nigerian setting. And I think those things have been highlighted in the poll here.
Okay, Banker, can you speak on question number 4, the results? What do you take from that?
I think it's representative of what we know. I also think that we should probably move on from that and see what we want to do. Because when you think about the unconscious bias, you have that in terms of pain management with women, Black women going into labor. We don't get the same treatment, right? We know the healthcare setting has a bias against us, but we still seek help despite that understanding. So I think the answers here show you what I'm trying to tell you. We somehow think that mental health is secondary, okay? So we can use excuses such as cultural barriers, unconscious bias, and conscious biases to deter ourselves. The minute you try to put it on the same level as those things that you experience, yet you seek help, you're going to go for it and adapt it. And one of the people in the audience was asking me how to utilize the help they get from work, knowing fully well that it's not culturally competent. It's because mental health is still mental health. You can stick to the skeletal framework and sort of chop rice, leave stone, you know, if you have to. So do see what you can do about that. This result is very reflective of our reality, and it's not optimum.
Interesting. Benga, I'll come to you next. What are your thoughts on the results we see on the screen here? You have to unmute yourself. All right, go on.
Yeah, it reflects what we've been talking about all along. In terms of the stigma, you don't want to share, talk to people to tell them exactly what you're going through, because if in doing that, you're kind of showing some form of weakness, and yeah, I agree with all the pose. Yeah. Language barrier, correct. Cultural barriers, yes. You can't tell people you're running mad now. They'll tell you to go to Yaba. Is it Yaba Akbosi or where?
Yaba left.
Yaba left.
Can I very quickly
go in, come in, Lade.
Point out, Benga, you've just hit another one of the stereotypes, isn't it? It feels like the assumption is that the moment you have a mental health problem, then you are mad. As a matter of fact, that's not the case. The majority of people that have mental health issues and challenges are actually regular people like me and you. Then there's really nothing wrong with them. And I think I need to sort of hone in on what Banker said earlier on about sort of treating mental health the same way as we treat our physical health. It's very, very important, because if someone's been diagnosed with diabetes, you've been told to take insulin or metformin every day, you'd be right there making sure that you're taking it regularly. You need to treat your mental health in a similar way, because you cannot have a proper balance if you don't do that. You can't achieve that. It's not possible. I can I just very quickly also answer a question I think that came up that I think was very important regarding getting people out of someone is feeling low and not motivated to do anything. How do you help them? How do you support them? What should they do? I think the key thing is education. Is what we're doing here, is what we're talking about. If you know for a fact that you can thrive with structured routine in place, and you know that that's the way to go, just know fully well that if you're lying down and not getting up, then you're just maintaining that problem and making it worse. And it's very important to actively do something about it. If you want to get yourself out of that hole or that difficulty, it's very important that you do that.
Thanks for that, Lade. Finally, I'm going to bring in Femi. Femi, your thoughts on the results of the poll, question number 4?
Yeah, they're not unsurprising. There's a few things I would like to point out. I think one of the ones is not knowing where to seek help. I think it's a big one. And I think there is an onus on all of us to educate each other on where to get help. But I think it's probably more not knowing where to seek help anonymously. I think if people can find help anonymously, they would be much more open. So I think that is one of it. I think sometimes it's not about help, it's about anonymous help. And the other thing I would just like to say is to slightly fly in the face of everything here is just to remind everyone that mental health in itself is a relatively new thing to the rest, even for the rest of the world. They are ahead of us, but even in the rest of the world, in the West as well, there is still a lot that they themselves are trying to battle to get people to open up to mental health. So as sub-Saharans, yes, it's for us, but let's not think everyone else has got it completely figured out as well. So let's continue to grow and do better, but let's not feel so bad that think that that we don't know anything, because even us doing this is already a sign that we are chipping away at it. So I think we're not in the dark ages. I think even in the West, places I've worked, they constantly talk about and educate people. And even where I work, even in the West where we work, even our Caucasian colleagues, not many of them struggle with coming out to say, I'm struggling with mental health. They don't. And once anyone has, I've known a few people that have taken time off to go on for stress, and people whisper about it. She had to take time off for mental health. She had to take time off for stress. And when she comes back, when that person came back, because it was a she in this case, the moment she went on holiday for anything, people said, oh, maybe she's struggling again. So it's everywhere. It's everywhere. Obviously, we are concerned about our own, but it's everywhere. So that's one thing I would say is help anonymously, and you know, it's everywhere, a challenge for everywhere in the world as well.
So I mean, that is so real what you just said, because now here's a person who is openly come out to express themselves what they're struggling with, and it's been sort of used as a ammunition against them. It's actually unfortunate. We have a comment from one of the audience members, Fadeke, thanks for joining us. She says, there's a thin line between empathy and pity though, and some people don't want to be pitied no matter what they're going through. Hence, they simply retreat into their shells as opposed seeking help. Lade, do you care to just spend just under a minute? Time is of the essence, and somebody has told me that Chelsea has considered a goal, so my mental health is being challenged right here. So yeah, Lade, please, as far as the comments from Fadeke, can you just speak on that, please?
Yeah, I think that again is one of the attributes of an individual playing a role in sort of obstructing their motivation to get help. I think I fall in that group of people who probably don't want to be pitied, or don't want to feel that I don't want anyone to think that I need their help. So there's a bit of pride that drives that sort of behavior, or that's like sort of thinking. But there's no evidence to actually say that this is what you get. How do you know that that's how people are going to respond to you? How do you know that they're just going to be, you're going to be pitying you? Of course, I think it's probably also down to your view of people around you. I think there's a bit of cynical thinking there as well, in terms of, people actually, you feel that people around you are not really out for your best interest, and that's what it is. I think the way to, what sort of thing to expect. I mean, we all have different experiences, and we have people that have different access to support. And I guess, I don't really know what sort of people each person, each of us surrounded with, and what sort of friends we have and stuff. But I think it's very important to know that you cannot use that as a reason not to seek help. I think it's about trying to figure out the right help for yourself. If you feel that people around you are going to end up pitying you, then you need to seek professional help that's non-judgmental, or that provides you that safe way of expressing your feelings and your thoughts without being sort of scrutinized or looked at in a particular way. But you need to find a way out to seek that help and actually get it, because it's not, you're not going to get any better. It's just going to get worse.
Thank you for that, Lade. Okay, so end of commentary and questions from the audience. Thanks for participating. So I have a few questions of my own, and I'm going to put that first of all to Lade. Lade, somebody having dada, aka dreadlocks, is that a sign of?
I've just been trying to hold it together. Now that you've asked, I think maybe I should see you separately outside the meeting, and we can talk a bit more in detail about this.
Okay.
No, actually, it's not. I mean, again, in the Nigerian setting, that might be an issue. People might read meanings into that.
Yes.
And if you walked into a hospital and you see a doctor with dreadlocks or long hair, you start to think, oh my God, is this person is this person right for me or whatnot? That's default thinking, and that's also down to society and cultural sort of beliefs and impressions that we've built within ourselves. But we need to be looking beyond that. We need to be asking questions. We need to be a bit more independent in our thinking and try to understand why certain things are a certain way or why we think in certain ways. And until we challenge ourselves at that level, we cannot break that sort of bondage that we find ourselves in terms of the way we think and the way we process things.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm glad because, again, we're talking about social stigma. People's physical appearance have often been used as ammunition against them. We've all seen what has happened in Nigeria over the last couple of weeks and months. So that's one of the reasons why I put that in there, so that we could, in our own little way, touch on the subject without touching on the subject. So we've come to the end of the webinar as we,
I
as it
think
is.
I think Banker has one or two things to say. Sorry.
No, I'll get to that.
All
We're
right,
going to give
okay.
I'm going to give each of you just a minute to have our parting words and do your shout outs in a second. I just wanted to leave my last thoughts, which is knowledge of self. I find, and this is me personally, knowledge of self is very important. We tried as much as possible to start looking at this subject holistically before trying to draw focus down to ourselves culturally. And I just wanted to leave with the thought of knowledge of self. You need to know who you are. Knowing who you are is a journey because you are constantly evolving as a human being. Knowledge of self is important. And I put patience in there because I wanted to use an example. You might be a patient individual by nature, but then again, your patience is, it now depends on the context in which your patience is required. One individual might be patient enough to let his tea brew, but you don't have the patience to let your gari rise and let your eba soak. So knowledge of self, knowing where and how these things apply to you based on who you are, is the point I'm trying to drive here. The solution for A is different for the solution for B. And to segue back to the question about Sally in HR not understanding, people from my cultural background, the only way companies can be able to help their staff, apart from the obvious, which is letting the HR be reflective of the demographic of the people. The other part is, as an individual, you have almost like a social and professional responsibility to give feedback to your HR in whatever organization you work. You have that social responsibility to interact. You have to become part of that data set that they study to help the next person. So you staying in your own shell, keeping to yourself saying, oh, they won't understand, is actually not helping. At this point, even myself, I'm guilty of this equally. I'm trying to see how I can challenge myself to be part of the conversation within my work environment. Because only if I speak about my challenges can they relate my challenges to the next person who looks just like me. So I just wanted to leave that parting note there before asking our our panelists to do their thanks and their shout outs and their parting statements. So we start in the order with which we finished. So I'm going to start with Benga, then we're going to go with Femi, then we're going to go with Banker, then we'll end with Lade, then we'll close the webinar. So Benga, any thanks, shout outs, parting words you wish to put across, please do so.
I think at the end of the day, what I would say is this: no, we should, as much as possible, try and not disturb ourselves about things that are outside our control. Our focus should always be things that are within our control and what we can do to improve those things. There's absolutely nothing you can do in situations that are outside your control. So that itself will give you so much problem if you think you can make a change for a situation that is definitely not within your control. So that's all I can say. Yeah.
Okay, Femi, do you want to go? Femi, do you want to go next? Parting words, shout outs, anything you want to say, please go ahead and do so.
Yeah, I think the main thing I just want to say is I think you've said a good thing, which is know your knowledge of self. I think there's a saying, know thyself and to thyself be true. I think knowing yourself and and the things that make your highs and lows and things that set you off, really having an awareness of yourself is very, very important. But I also say trying to seek a balanced life. The moment you have a balanced life, you're on track, you know. And that knowledge of self really means not measuring yourself by other people. A big part of this mental health thing is also part of that. A lot of us look at what other people have or do and think we have to have the exact same thing. So the moment you know yourself and you know what gives you your peace, then you try to find it with balance, financial, family, relationship, business, career. Find balance, what works for you, and seek it. And I'd just like to shout out to the Efikos guys. This is amazing, really good. Thank you very much for having me. It's a pleasure and it's an honor to be on with everyone. And just a little shout out to my own personal podcast. We do cover, not exactly this, but we always cover just ways to help you become your best. So I've put the link in the chat box. So do check out my podcast on you on List Femi Akemi on all the major platforms. And there's a link if you want to listen to anything. And there's even one on just health and performance. So enjoy. But thank you for having me, guys. Much appreciated.
Thank you for that, Femi. Banker, next, go right ahead.
Okay, so Kay, I just want to tell you, if having a dada is okay by you and it's not you letting yourself go due to your self-awareness, rock on. If it isn't, that's the time to seek help, okay? So yeah, mindfulness, I think that's for me what has helped me. Continue to know yourself, continue to do the things that get you familiar with your mind. The act that you have to act on is just mind training. It could be journaling. It could just be getting to know what's real and what's perceived. And yeah, you know, talk to people, be comfortable, be the change you want to see, you know, let people know this is who you are, and then you wouldn't really have to play to the gallery and you'll be happier. That's it. It's really that simple.
Thank you for that, Banker. Dr. Lade, last words.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much for having me on your program today. It's just to sort of again highlight the importance of staying well and healthy. If you do experience a stress or problem that puts you down, I think it's just normal for everyone to have a period of time to sort of you get yourself through that difficult bit, but make sure that it doesn't get to the point where it starts to impact your function. And that's when you know that the stress is hitting home if you're not able to do what you normally would do. And that's when you need to start taking active steps to make sure that you are not going down that rabbit hole, and you put things in place in terms of putting a structure around yourself to protect yourself to start with, and then look around you and look at the best way to seek help or access support professionally. I think that's very important that we do. Thank you so much.
Thank you for that, Lade. And thank you to the audience members. You guys have been amazing. Thanks for joining us. I mean, hey, usually participations fluctuates depending on, time in within the webinar. This is 2 hours, 18 minutes in, and you guys are still with us, man. Uh, there's no giveaway, or just in case people are waiting for giveaway. I know Nigerians, people are, maybe somebody expecting us to send credit, go see you. There's no giveaway. But anyways, thanks for joining us. And this webinar is being recorded, and we'll be posting the link on the YouTube link shortly. So as long as you've registered, you will always receive a link for the video YouTube for access. And you also receive the PowerPoint slides that we presented today. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for joining us, and do have a great evening. Cheers.
Thank
Bye.
you.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Nice one.
Bye.
Thank you.